This is David Goldsmith, and welcome to another edition of the Project Moon Hut educational series. I'm excited to be outlining this one particular program because I think it will be useful for everybody to understand where a box and a roof and a door came from. So this is going to be reviewing the first occurrence at Scratch Restaurant in Mountain View, California, right in the middle of Silicon Valley. At the heart of when Silicon Valley was taking off and accelerating with the Airbnbs and the Ubers of the world, that the Facebook phenomenon had kept on growing. But at this time, if you traveled back to 2014, I personally knew very little about space. My collective space experience added up to 2 3-hour sessions with people at NASA, a tour of NASA. So let's say it was 9 hours. Great conversations, learned a lot. Elon was a star, but not the big star he is today. An Aussie friend of mine had put $200,000 to go on Virgin Galactic and still hadn't flown. And that one of the conversations struck me while I was at NASA's that they said that if people would look back at this time, they might think that from 1969 to today, that people at Earth had gotten dumber, that NASA had become a black hole. And yet at the same time, space, let's include everything space, was a $330 billion industry. International Space Station was up and we had made some great achievements. Yet it was the beginning. So picture I'm sitting at a table, having lunch, and Bruce is sharing with me the challenges that he's having with space. And at that time, one of the comments he made was he said, we're working on the challenges of what if a woman gets pregnant on the moon. It's 1/6 gravity, so one of the challenges, we're not sure if a person can come back. I leaned over to Bruce and said, you're trying to solve 1,000 Rubik's Cubes at once. In order to get to the moon, that is not the forefront. That's not what we should be spending our time on. While it's important later on, at this time we should be thinking differently. Going through my head was that in a very quick time I had to change his paradigm of possible opportunities that could happen in the space industry. I knew from my experiences in Silicon Valley what we can leverage in terms of 2014 tools. Needed to adjust his focus and to show him a radically different way of looking at the space industry. So with that in mind, I said to him, would you like to hear how I would get us to space, or to the moon specifically? We had an over 1-hour conversation. It wasn't a monologue like this, it was a conversation. And during that conversation, I learned a lot, and I think he did too, and it became the foundation of where I'm going to take you right now. So this is the original construct. There's no change from 2016 or 14. Let me explain to you my thinking is that as a consultant, as one of the businesses I own, I'm often walked into environments where major companies, I won't list their names, have given these 50 or 100 or 200 page plans that people should follow. But if you actually ask them to do it, they couldn't. I always give plans for any client I'm working with exactly the way I would do it if I had to do it myself. And that I'm a big proponent of phases, steps, different ways to help people be able to segment and partition their thinking so that they can understand where we're going. So what I said to Bruce was, we need to create or have, in phase 1, out of 4 you will see, a box with a roof on the moon. Now what he didn't realize that was happening in my mind was I was saying, okay, we have to do this quickly. We have to increase the number of players, have them work together. We have to accelerate the space ecosystem. We have to create an ecosystem because from what I had learned, it's really a ragtag global endeavor. And I could also sense that from just looking at the business cards on decks, and I had gone to where the event that I met Bruce, I saw a disjointed day of presentations. I knew that there was a technical project side of it and that we had to have a global consensus engaged. So with that in mind, I said to him, we need first to establish a structure, a box with a roof and on the moon. I didn't say door, I said a box with a roof. And I said, what we need is to have 4 to 8 people go around the moon. I didn't know it was 27 days then. And why I used 4 to 8 is there was a common consensus, articles being written. We needed approximately 107, 108 people to create a space or a moon base. And I said, let's start with 4 to 8. That's something we get our minds around. They go around once, and at least some of them return. And the thinking was that explorers have dangerous conditions. And I'll share with you later why I thought that way. But in the context of this, some people might not return. I didn't know how cold it was and how hot it was. I just knew that these were extreme temperatures. And it couldn't be robots, because looking up to the moon is not going to accelerate the Earth and space-based ecosystem. And I equated, and I said, Bruce, think of it like Roger Bannister. And Bruce is old enough to know Roger Bannister. This would be the Roger Bannister of space. In 1954, this young man was trying to achieve what was considered psychologically and physiologically impossible, to break the 4-minute mile. And he did. He did 3 minutes and 59 seconds, 0.4. He broke the 4-minute mile the first time in human history. And what was interesting was, shortly thereafter, others followed suit. Once someone's done something, other people mentally feel they can do it, but they've also been able to reconstruct and redo and make the same achievements again and again. So I said to him, imagine this, we get a box with a roof on the moon. The first pictures of people walking hand in hand in tranquility would be the most downloaded Valentine's picture in history. And I was not sure why, since 1969, we had not achieved this. And I think it was because of an old paradigm way of thinking. It was a shotgun approach. So many different organizations. And again, remember, I'm not an expert here. I'm an individual laying out macro tactics on how to get to the moon. And from everything I heard, this was a shotgun approach. Everybody doing their own thing, trying to make sure that we get up there. No coherent single strategy, no coherent set of tactics to make this happen. I said we have to convert to a rifle. We have to get as many organizations as rapidly involved in this so that we, as a group, get onto the moon. And my thinking, and I shared this with him, is once that happens, we're going to have an explosion of innovation, no different than Roger Bannister. We'd have people curious, looking up, wanting to learn more about the moon, watching them on screens to see how they're living. Education would happen through all sorts of medium, including schools. It would know it would be possible. And even more so, banking and industry would follow suit. It would be proof of concept. So part of that job of those individuals would be then to address phase 2. Now, phase 2 is this. It is the development of an industrial park. Now, why did I not go to, like everybody else that I had seen at that time, for the images of these entire villages or cities being built, and I had seen through my life the terraforming of Moon and Mars. It doesn't start that way. It typically in history doesn't. I said we have to show and then create an industrial park, and think about it, a building, so that we can have economic value. And humans, while they want to be altruistic, tend to always, not always, that's a bad word, they tend to invest when there's a financial gain. Personally, I don't believe that people are driven for humanity, that everybody's going to help and share and do kumbaya together. So if they are going to do a project, government gets involved, such as landing on the moon, but that was a military or a government position against Russia and the United States. Education does try to promote this, and yet it still goes back to how can we create rapid economic value? How can we also drive innovation? Well, there are many that won't be able to be involved in this. So if we can show them the next iteration, there will be some groups that will participate in building the industrial park. And it will be economically viable versus the cities and the designs I had seen. So what popped into my mind was this. Why don't we create a submarine? And I'm drawing it like a submarine because that was what was in my head. So this is on top and it's underneath. I didn't know about putting it into lava tubes or into craters. I didn't think about putting it underwater. I thought of us building a building. It would be the size of a submarine. You could rent out office space at about 400 square feet or 40 square meter inside. And you, as a company, an organization, could rent this space and do work on the moon. It would be an industrial park on the moon, a building, the first one in a series of starting, like on Earth, the development of a community around business. And then what I said was, and this is going to be tough. It's going to be tough living. We're going to have beds that everybody can share. And he said, yeah, it's called a hot bunk. I didn't know that. A hot bunk is when you sleep on a bed in a submarine, you get out and somebody else gets into it, and you get out after your shift and someone else gets into it. So you're sharing beds, you're sharing services, computer repair, food, power. There will be companies that are paid to be able to support this industrial park. Don't get stuck on the shape, just like don't get stuck on the shape. It's about the construct of an industrial park. I don't know what it will look like. And I don't know if anybody today knows what it looks like. However, I'm hoping this will give you ideation to think how it might look. And what would it be? What would its purpose be? Its purpose would be this. We need to start selling, to prove this investment, something from the moon to the earth. So maybe it's the first perfume ever sold from the moon to the earth and it's $1,000 an ounce. Maybe wealthy individuals buy this for $10,000. Not unlike thinking about buying moon rocks. It could be for new materials, for bio or physical materials that could be used on Earth that are stronger using the materials in space. It could be mining or research for future mining or pharmaceuticals developing. The value of being into space is this, is that there's microgravity and there's low atmosphere. And the almost zero atmosphere allows you to be able to explode things, I learned that, where you wouldn't have the same consequences on Earth. And the microgravity allows you to create molecules and do other activities, I'm not going to go into the details, which you couldn't do otherwise. And I said to him flat out, this is a bad idea, that entertainment is going to be the future. It's not sustainable. All we've done so far is put a box of the roof and a door on the moon. They've gone around. These people have started to build with robotics, with other tools, this system. And why? Why is that important? It's because we need to create an ecosystem between the Earth and the moon. And if the moon produces something, they can then sell it to the Earth, which they would need supplies or go back and forth. And next thing you know, you start this little tiny industrial park sales route that's happening. So maybe an order is placed from the moon to the Earth, or the Earth needs something and it sends an order from the Earth to the moon, moon to the Earth, going back and forth, maybe even to the International Space Station or a mid-station. There would be sharing. Why did I come up with this? I thought that if an organization can get involved, they might pay $10, $20 million a month to be the first, to have that label. And that individuals would stay, and maybe it would cost $200,000 to $400,000 for the time frame per month that they're there. These are not real numbers. They were made up, but I didn't know that much about the space industry. However, I did know a construct that I could, and I said to him, think of it this way. Let's take a page out of history. Throughout history, explorers have left their homes for opportunity. They have looked to create wealth around the world by looking for resource expanding. Maybe it was religious persecution they wanted to get away with. I'm not an historian, but I can tell you that someone, a body, a group, they put together funds and they traveled. And they were looking for riches, or they were looking to leave persecution. And some made it their home as they moved forward. And the best way to think about it in my mind at the time when I was talking to Bruce was I said to him, think of it in this manner. The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria were funded by kings of Spain. They got onto a vessel and they traveled in search of the West Indies. They were looking for wealth. And I don't care if it was the first trip or the Vikings had done it in this experience, or just take the construct, is what happened was they left and they went across the ocean and they found this place now named North America. And they said, wow, look at what we found. There's new opportunity. There could be wealth or money or safety or something developed. And they dropped off a bunch of people and they said, here are some supplies. We'll be back. And they hopped on a boat and realized this is a long time ago. That boat might never have returned. They might have all capsized at sea and they would have been stuck. But they did make it back. And here, these individuals had to live on their own for a period of time. They had to find their way in this new world. Many people died. It wasn't this euphoria and utopia. They died. But when they got there and they told the individuals and they said, hey, look what we found. We found this area. And what you need to do is you need to help. We're going to raise some more money. Venture people who had money were planning for new trips. People who were in business said there's an opportunity. And they started to send new people over. And the first ships were just a few, and they made a bigger base. They found that most of the people died. But they made a bigger fort, and then eventually a bigger and a multiple forts. And these groups, to make money, they found skins. They might have built something. They bought supplies. They learned about the land. And over time, you saw sheriffs and educators and individuals travel while others went back. And eventually there was a full economic system set up, as well as an ecosystem to support the travel. And if you use that thinking, just as simple as that is, I think you can get an understanding as we're going to put a box with a roof and a door, and then we're going to create an industrial park to be able to sell something so that we can create the start of an economic engine. And their job was to work on number 3, because any community, according to this brilliant guy from Morningstar, Chris Roofer, he came up with the categories, and I don't know if he originated it, but he eloquently expressed it to me one day. He said, humans have needed food, water, shelter, transportation, communication, entertainment since the beginning of time. And no matter where you look in history, there's always been a need for that to have a sustainable or a thriving ecosystem. So where do we go from here? That group is responsible for building what I said to him in phase 3, which will be our extended stay. And he laughed. He laughed because he said there's a guy by the name of Bigelow who made his money in extended stay hotels, where he's creating these structures that can go into rockets and they can expand out and create, either in space or potentially on the moon, a place for people to live. I didn't know that. What I had pictured was we have this industrial park, and then we needed a place, once we know a little bit more about what's going on, how to thrive there, where we can have an improved living conditions. So you get a room with a bed, and you can put up a picture of your family, and you can have a little closet and put up your spacesuit. I mean, you can have some of your own little privacy, starting to create a little bit more of a human habitation. Might it be 2 people in a room or 3? It didn't matter. It's just that we're moving. And at the same time, they might even thinking about another facility. They would stay a little bit longer instead of a month or 2, because we'll have more flights going back and forth. They do the same thing, shared services. Maybe there's a food company, a technology company to fix your laptops and supplies, maybe to do your laundry. So they would be collectively working in the industrial park, and they'd have their space here. They'd even have room for entertainment and billboards, and they'd have plants and food being grown. the whole process was, I was trying to remember what this was for. Bigelow has since shut down, and I didn't know why. And I was just told, I'm not going to go into the reasons. Someone who knows him well, that for personal reasons they have shut down, and also because of COVID. Doesn't mean they won't restart again. So anybody's interested in the Bigelow company. And this is not sustainable, self-sustaining. This is sustained by Earth. We are bringing food. We are bringing supplies. I think when we think of self-sustaining, we jump so quickly to another iteration of the future that it becomes difficult to be able to solve all those Rubik's Cubes at once. And their job is to work on the next phase and maybe creating that second industrial park. See how it's growing and evolving. It's not an expansive development all at once. It's how we would do it naturally. So the extended stay is a building that people would live in. Now, because of time, remember, this is not going to happen day 1, day 2, day 3. Over time, we'll learn what products we can sell and buy and what we'll need. We learn from the previous people who were there. Our tools will have improved to be able to do mining or to build structures or to live on the moon. And so we might be the mining of the water at an improved rate or create new materials just even on the moon for the moon. We'd be better at space. We'd be thinking expansion. And I know there's a big consensus that we can mine on the moon. I didn't think about it this time. We can mine on the moon and ship it back to Earth. Yes, we can. But our primary customer, if you're mining, could be the building of these. I mean, if you had a timber mill, do you want to ship it an expensively far way away in the beginning? Or do you want to have a timber mill for homes being built right near you? So the focus should be to get this ecosystem developed. So they're now building, or we now move into community. This word community is a tough one because the first inclination is to think of everybody having a home. It's not that. Phase 4 is a set of structures where there might be 1 or 2 in extended stay living environments and maybe 2 or 3 industrial parks. There's an ecosystem happening, selling moon and Earth, as we've talked about. But at this point, you'll start to see wealthy individuals or organizations invest in having someplace on the moon. So be not living like we think of out on Earth. That's years off. And we're not going to have millions immediately living on the moon within the next 10 years. The moon is massive. It won't hurt it. And someone had shared with me that if you had a city the size of San Francisco on the moon, you couldn't even see the light of the city on Earth. So we'd be creating this little tiny community, and we would be building where individuals or organizations like a Microsoft or a 3M or Mercedes or Alibaba or Caterpillar, and I'm using these names because you would know them, mid and small cap and small organizations who get funded would be there. Don't know who would, but we'd start to see a small community building around the ecosystem. 2 things that I want to go over. First of all, I learned in martial arts that if you have a series of boards, say 5 of them, and you go to break them, if you hit the board and stop at the board, you'll break your hand. You have to go all the way through it. So the reason that we have the community and all of these other phases, in my thinking the first day with Bruce, is that there will be different organizations having to build those structures and think about it for later on. And if they don't go all the way through, if they don't know the plan, then organizations are not going to fulfill the need when it happens. So imagine showing up on the moon and no one has thought of the industrial park. And no one knows how that's being built, or there's not enough companies ready to take the space, or there are not enough, we can't get the systems to work to fulfill that need. And there's a construct or a thinking behind that. If we shoot rockets up and we get there, and now we say build it, it could be years before it's built. In new product development, which I taught at NYU for years, you can start say, the first generation of something and work on it, and simultaneously be working on the next, and the next, and the next. So we can, in theory, have people only working on phase 1, people only working on phase 2, people working on 3, people working on community. And they are all necessary to build this ecosystem. Again, remember, I wasn't a space person. I was helping Bruce to see a different reality. The first question that I got from Bruce, the real serious first question, I had others. Again, I'm trying to cut down a very long conversation, and this is a long video already, is he said, well, who's going to pay for it? The government, right? And he used that assumptive right. He's saying, David, see, government has to pay for this. And my reaction was, no, that's not sustainable. It's not. Governments can be a part of expansion, and they're often those that start an ecosystem, and put in things such as infrastructure. But if it's not a holistic ecosystem, it won't survive. So my reaction was everybody and nobody. And what was going through my mind at that time was that I had an AI company and we worked on networks and analysis. And one of the things that I believed is if we can get more companies investing themselves in the prospect of a box with a roof and a door and the full phases, what would happen is that money would pour in out of people's pockets every day. Millions and billions of dollars would be invested. It's not unlike how it's happening today. There are space companies starting, and people put in as an investor or themselves $1 million, $10 million, $20 million to be able to build that ecosystem. So if everybody's putting it in and nobody's putting it in, we eventually get there. So you have to think in networks, and there's this law called Metcalfe's law. It's the value of the network increases, the size of it, the more capable it is, the stronger it is. So the example is if you have one phone and no one else has a phone, you have no one to call, so you don't have a network. But if you have 2, 3, or 5 people to call, the phone becomes more usable. If you have 500 people to call, that phone becomes valuable. Well, if we can create a better ecosystem, and if you've seen the tools for Project Moonhut, you'd understand that's exactly what we're building, is a stronger ecosystem. And we could find opportunities in that network for others, we could survive. And this is what Palo Alto and Mountain View was about. With our company, our AI company, one day I was with Jay and we were talking, and we have this technology to help to facilitate this. And he said to me, David, what about your database? And I think at the time I had 800 or 900 contacts in Silicon Valley, tend to be CEOs, executives of companies, or high-level ranking people, and we put them into our engine, and we came back with visibility we couldn't see otherwise. And because we were doing something that's called computational social science with artificial intelligence and machine learning. Well, what if we applied this to the space industry? What if we had more people interested in the space industry and more individuals participating on an economic level or even just in a contributing level? They know what was going on in space and they saw a future. What we're doing is by creating this is decreasing risk. So that was in my head, and what I said to him, let's say we had this company such as Caterpillar. They might want to do mining on the moon. And he says, yes, they do. I said they could have little cats, like remote mining. But for them, I said, if Caterpillar got engaged in this, and I remember drawing this type of image, there were others, and I said, if Caterpillar did it on its own and they went to their shareholders and said, we're going to spend $1 billion or $2 billion or $5 billion in space, they'd say, forget about it. We can't invest that type of money. But what if, using our tools, our technology, we can get more people involved in the space industry, but we could also identify customers that could work and buy their product on Earth, remote mining technologies, or tools that they create out of that, maybe not the full mining, then they have customers also on the moon. Their cost or risk might go down to $500 million or $250 million. So if they went to their shareholders and said, we've got 10 customers who will buy from us on Earth and on the moon, if we deliver on this, then the shareholders might say, that's a good investment to participate in, or their board of directors. But let's say we did this, we were even smarter. Using the right technology, we can help these individuals find 10 of their own, and then 10 of their own, and 10 of their own. Can you see how if you can develop an ecosystem of the space industry, you can amplify this? I also knew this had to be nonprofit. It could not be a profit venture, because the minute you added a profit venture in terms of making this happen, it would not work. Because in my few months of experience with NASA, I saw that there were companies trying to do all of these things, but we had a bigger plan. And the technology, which I'm assuming you've already heard about, would explain how we're going to make this happen. In order to build that sustainable, not self-sustaining, but sustainable ecosystem, it also has to be done fast. If you buy that phone and the next person buys the phone 6 months later, and the next 6 months later, it doesn't make it. They had 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, that landed. But the others started to come more quickly. And in today's time, because of the way the technology on an Airbnb or an Uber or many of these other platforms, I'm using names that people would recognize, is that they can get that network effect quickly. And that they're not going it alone. They'd be getting help to be able to create that ecosystem. And we'd focus on the world's energy, meaning the humankind spirit, to get these 4 phases in line. And not everybody is going to participate. There are many different types of organizations trying to solve this challenge. But what if we could get 5,000 or 10,000 who learn from us, grow from us, policy is impacted by us in some way, we help them, and we're not going to go into the details. We help them find alliances quickly. They can get there and the energy moves us forward. So money, innovation, and talent tends to follow suit. 6 years later, we are still following the exact same sequence of events. It has not changed, but there are details that we've been added to this. Now, there was more we went over with Bruce, but when I was done, it was a great conversation. It was exciting and enlightening. Bruce said to me, "What are you doing in 2 weeks?" And I said, "I'm going to be in Hong Kong." He says, "No, you're not. You're going to be in Hawaii at the Great Giant Leap event." And I said, "No, I'm not. It's going to cost me probably about $7,000 to change my ticket." And he said, "No, David, you don't understand. Buzz Aldrin's going to be there. The person who put the rover onto the comet is going to be there from France. These are some of the top people in the space industry going to be there." I'm not going to get into it now, but it was like a PhD event. This was not a fun event. And I said, "No, I'm not interested." And as we're walking out, Bruce says to me, "David, we don't need a box with a roof." And I thought, I screwed it up. He said, "David, what we need is a box with a roof and a door. We need a home on the moon." And if you're a branding person or a marketing person or a business owner, you could understand that an hour and a half or 2 hours earlier, I had made this statement of a box with a roof on the moon, and he was still repeating it 2 hours later and improving on it. And a box with a roof and a door is a hut, an HUT. 2 years later, Bruce named Project Moon Hut after a box with a roof and a door. The team at NASA had named us Project Moon Hut. But that wasn't the end. I flew back to Hong Kong, and I was sitting with Veronica, who was running our office in Hong Kong. And she's a Slovakian, and that's in the middle of Europe. And she has an accent, like I have an accent, but her accent was very similar to my grandmother, who grew up who was born in Hungary. And my grandmother was this tiny woman. She had passed away. And I told Veronica about the story and about the box with the roof and a door. And I didn't realize the brand recognition that NASA had because I was not a space person. I was done. This was over for me. And she looked at me, and I'm very bad at accents, my kids will tell you, and she says, "You're going. Trust me, you're going." And I thought I heard my grandmother in the back saying, "David, you have to make this trip." And Veronica made those changes to my agenda so I could be at the event in Hawaii. I'm not going to go over that. It's too much already. We've covered a lot today. Yet this is important as a means to understand the overall scope of what we're building. I do hope that after hearing this, you can understand a few things that are going on. We're giving direction, but we're not building it ourselves in Project Moon Hut. We're not defining how the box and a roof and a door looks, because we want innovation to happen from all these amazing people around the world who get involved in designing the box with a roof and a door. How would that look? There are experts who know what we need to do for radiation. There are experts who know what needs to be done to be able to keep humans safe and to survive on the approximately minus 150 to plus 100 degrees Celsius temperatures, very cold and very hot. We're not designing or building the industrial park because we want to see what other people develop. Our role in Project Moon Hut is to facilitate making this happen. And if you integrate the software design of the MearthNet that has alliance development, community engagement, and governance coordination, and you can understand how this will accelerate the Earth and space-based ecosystem, you could see that we will be creating that rifle, and we'll get to the moon, and we will change how we live on Earth for all species in the process of making it happen. I hope this was helpful in many ways to understand where this came from. 6 years later, we're still working on it, and I'm proud to say we've got some amazing people on our team helping us to move this forward. So with that said, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. I know people on the team or someone who sent this to you would love to hear from you too, so that we can make sure we keep on helping everybody understand the direction we're taking.